Canada appealed the initial 6-point deduction. The Canadian Olympic Committee and Canada Soccer saying that they believe that was too harsh a punishment. That is in the past now because it ends up being irrelevant. But within all of the reports and the judgments that have been handed out from the various courts and governing bodies, Gareth Wheeler, we have learned some more information, whether that's how forthcoming Canada have been to FIFA, to the IOC, to these various parties, and who else might be implicated in this when you zoom out from just the women's national team and the incident against New Zealand. There was the report, of course, from FIFA, and from that report and the revelations within it, Gareth, what maybe what was the headline that you grabbed onto right away from those revelations?
All right, I'll try not to drone on about this.
Very good.
Drone joke.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. Delay the too soon. It's not too soon. The FIFA report that was released was pretty damning. I do have 3 takeaways from the report. We don't have time to get into every little bit of detail here. I do think that Canada are fortunate to stay in this tournament because FIFA have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to cheating like this. They were told not to bring drones to this tournament. FIFA, the Olympics, all their code of conduct, this is entirely frowned upon. So I do think that's my first takeaway, that Canada are still lucky to be in this tournament. Number 2, Joey Lombardi has a big role to play still, obviously. In the report, he accepted sole responsibility for him going out and using the drone, and then was thrown into jail for 3 days because of it. But based upon what Kevin Blue and the CSA have put forward, the investigation went much deeper, and it turned into a systematic issue and a cultural issue, which goes beyond Joey Lombardi and his role. It's going to be really interesting to see what he says and how he says it, or whether he's willing to change his story over the next little bit, because he's at the center of this all and one of the key figures going forward. The third thing is this report that's being commissioned by Canada Soccer. I just don't know the name of the woman that's conducting the search right here in front of me right now, but it has to be done in a timely manner. Like, this needs to be put behind Canada Soccer as soon as possible so people can move forward with an understanding. Like, there are lives and livelihoods on the line here. So whether it's names being cleared or, culprits being found out, I mean, this all needs to be done in a timely manner. I'm talking like a month. Like the McLaren report, when it came out, it just took way too long. It took like 8 or 9 months. It was supposed to take like 1 or 2. And then by the time that it's delivered, it kind of loses its punch and its impactfulness. So this needs to be done in a timely manner in order because now FIFA, based upon Kevin Blue's transparency over the course of the scenario, they're expecting in great detail what the issues have been and who is to blame around this. There was names redacted. It was very easy to figure out who those names were or are within the filing. So these reports need to be done in a timely manner in order to provide some closure or some solutions to solving these issues.
Gareth, just to color in the blank, Sonia Reagan-Bogan of Matthews, Dinsdale and Clark has been the person retained for the independent external review. Oliver Platt, on to you.
Yeah, I'll be really quick on this, just to add to what Wheels was saying there. Like the last thing that's written in this report, I think, is one of the most significant things. It basically states what's going to happen going forwards here, and it notes that the sanction that Canada has already faced, the points deduction, the suspensions, they relate only to the incidents that occurred at the Olympic tournament, right? So all of the historic stuff that's coming out, that's yet to kind of be judged on, I guess. And that it goes on to say they're expecting the CSA to provide FIFA with the results of said investigation in order to be able to assess and decide whether further action by FIFA bodies is necessary and appropriate. So the way I kind of interpret that is FIFA's telling Canada Soccer, we're going to give you a chance here, get your house in order. If we're not satisfied that you've done it, we'll do it for you. And so that's indicates, I think, the importance of this investigation and getting it right, and ensuring that things are dealt with appropriately. I'll also just add that there's a note from an email Bev Priestman sent claiming that this kind of drone activity can be the difference between winning and losing. I am really concerned if any head coach in the Canadian program really believes that. And I'm not a coach. I can't say with authority whether it's true or not. I personally don't believe that is true, even in the slightest. And it's really disappointing to me to see that written down by a Canadian head coach. So
yeah,
I'll leave it at that. But that to me was something that clearly stood out.
Yeah, Ollie, there's a big difference in saying everyone else is doing it. Of course, people are going to be suspicious of other teams. Of course, allegations might be levied, but who's getting caught? And these would be very public in nature, just like this, when you're caught. So it's one thing to say that everyone's doing it under a veil of paranoia or overprotectiveness or whatever you want to call it, or insecurity. But it's another thing actually getting caught doing it, and there being a paper trail seemingly behind the history of doing that. That's not something that you can just accuse other nations of having as well without proper evidence of that.
Yeah, the story is far from over, and it is one I'm sure that there will be more findings as we go along, and we will continue to react to them as they are made available to us. We will stay with the Canadian national teams, though we will pivot to the young Reds, and that is the Canadian under-20 side at the CONCACAF U20 Championship. They had a golden opportunity to get back to the FIFA U20 World Cup in what has been, I think it's getting close to 20 years at this point. And this seemed like a group that was galvanized in their own right. Some late wins, the first match where they conceded at the death to give up 2 points. They found a way to rebound with a victory, to grind out a good results, and then they faced Panama in the quarterfinal rounds with that win and you're in mentality. They concede to Modeo in the 95th minute, 5 minutes into added time, and they weren't able to get back. Their tournament is done. Their World Cup hopes are done, Jordan Wilson. And as it feels as though there's some momentum being gained, especially with the men's program in terms of just how big of a jump that has been made. For the U20s to get knocked out in the quarters to Panama feels like a big blow to the group who had some pretty high aspirations.
Yeah, for sure. And on both sides, right? Like you look at the national team for the women, you look at the national team for the men, and you're like, there are players here, the success stories. But this is nothing new from, like, I would say the U14, U15 level to about the U20s. Right. And everyone talks about the hop, skip, and a jump that maybe you have to do as a player and the places you got to go, and talk about the system. But for me, quite frankly, I know these guys are doing their best and busting their tail. But for me, I've always thought as a Canadian, like, our best players, our top players, or the hidden gems don't represent our country. It's the players that are maybe seen the most that end up going here. Furthermore, I want to say that what is our system? Even speaking with Ollie, just talking as two brothers, just talking about the game. You're saying, like, what is the Canada identity? How are they going to camp, and how are they playing, and how are you building that? Like, we wouldn't know. And we follow footy all the time. Wheels has been in the game for so long and taking it in. What is the Canadian brand? How do we go into it? Not so long, but you're just a seasoned vet, my brother.
It's been an incredibly long time.
If I said forever, then I would be, but you've been here so long. Seasoned vet. All I'm trying to say is we need to get to the point where there's some unity. There's something within the ranks that the U15s, U17s, U20s play a certain way. We focus a lot on the national team. A lot of negative attention, or a lot of the dollars might be going there. What about the grassroots? Because for me, there are certain gems that are just falling and slipping through the cracks. And I'll even go a little bit further. People be like, oh, you just came from the CPL. This is what you're thinking about. The players, the majority of players that go and represent the country play for Vancouver Whitecaps or Toronto FC Academy. What about, when are we going to start building things up so you can feed it properly? Whether that be in the CPL or having stronger League One teams that could funnel into that. These are things we have to take into consideration, because on the youth level, we're not doing well, but there's still talent in this country, and we want to call ourselves a football nation. So for me, it's just a bit disheartening, the fact that this is the result, another World Cup you're not qualifying for. But yeah, I look around and I know that there's talent within this country. So we just need to get our act together a little bit.
Ollie.
Well, firstly, I'll say we just showed the penalty decision through VAR. I thought the penalty was very debatable, and the red cards was totally ridiculous. So there was definitely a bad break for this Canada team in this game. That being said, I did think some of the appeals and the conduct from the Canadian players wasn't necessarily what you wanted to see either, and got a little bit out of hand at the end. So that was a little bit disappointing to see. But yeah, like Jordan has been through a lot of it for me. I don't think we know who our best players are in these age groups in this country. We've talked about that a bunch over the past few weeks, and we could do a whole episode on it if we wanted to, with some of the issues in talent ID there. And I don't want to say that we don't have a style of play, because I think there is an attempt at something, but it's very pedestrian and very predictable, and I have no idea who's deciding what that style of play should be throughout the Canada soccer programs and throughout the youth levels. So there are big picture questions to look at here. Obviously, Canada soccer has a lot going on right now, and so finding the people and the resources to answer these questions is always the challenge. But we're just kind of, it feels like while there's been some progress, we're still to a certain extent going through the motions a little bit, I think, when it comes to our youth national teams.
Yeah, I mean,
CPLers and 3 in general sent off in the match, Gareth. Just to mention that there is definitely, not to say a discipline problem, but there is a maturity aspect, even if this is a youth national team.
The behavior was unbecoming for a Canadian national team for me. Like, the referee was a nightmare. Okay, like it was never a sending off. It was a penalty. I don't even buy that, but the sending off was ridiculous, and it changed the game. I understand the frustration, but Canada went and scored just a couple minutes later, and it was 1-1. But they completely lost their heads, and some of the so-called leaders in the team did. And the stuff that was coming from the bench, like, it was out of control. They're still chasing the game, and players are still losing their minds. The Panama players were diving all over the field trying to time waste. Guys, like, this is playing in CONCACAF. This is playing at this level. To me, I didn't like seeing the young players play like that, and some of them really need to grow up if they're going to make it in the professional game. Look, I don't want to get into the development side of things necessarily here. We just simply don't have time. I'll say this. There's a lot of good players on this Canada under-20 team, not a lot of great players. A lot of 6.5s out of 10, but very few 8.5s. That's the problem. Like, when you come through an era where you bring through the likes of Alphonso Davies and Jonathan Davids, like, these players are unicorns. They don't come around very often. There's a lot of solid players. I look at this team, perhaps the goalkeeper, maybe 1 or 2 have a shot at maybe working their way into the Canada team in the next 2 cycles. But there's some players that need a lot of growth. And that's what concerns me, because I look at the other side in Panama, and a lot of these players were playing in the Panama second division against men. Against real competition, they look so much more accomplished and ready to play. And they actually have some star players on that team. And that's Panama that we're talking about, like a really underrated nation. So yeah, we need to get our act together in terms of talent, just identifying talent and being able to develop it as well. It's the same issues. For me, I'll just say this to wrap up. The CPL is the way to go. Like, playing in a developmental league, like, go in your top domestic league, play against men, accomplished professionals week in, week out, and see you develop. And I think that some of the CPL players on this team were some of the best ones as well. So we'll see what this looks like moving forward.
Top picks presented by Tony Bet. I will assign each of the gentlemen a match. I will take the 4th because we have a busy match week 17 coming up. Let's go with Gareth Wheeler, Pacific York United, Pacific at home, looking for a big bounce back, plus 160. York United plus 175. The Dogs on the road.
Yeah, because I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. I'm taking the under 2 at plus 110 here. Pacific went back into the transfer market and signed another Argentine defender, because if you're good at defense, if you're a good defensive team, you might as well bolster that area as well. So they're tough to break down, especially at home. York only 8 goals in 8 games away from home. So let's take the under in this game.
They did ship 3 to Valor, so maybe James Mayer was like, I could use some reinforcements.
Tighten that up.
Jordan Wilson, Atletico Ottawa at home to Cavalry. Value here, plus 340 on the Cavs, minus 134 for Ottawa at home.
Atletico Ottawa got that humble, that little spanking last week at York Lions Stadium. And just 4 of those bad boys. You got 4 of those quick. I don't see them repeating themselves in terms of a loss. I will say Calvary going to play them at TD Place. It's always a spicy match. You have
plus 309, plus 309 on Calvary.
You have Tommy Wilson Jr. always shushing, but look, I think this is going straight back to the dinosaurs. I think Atletico Ottawa are getting this win. I don't think by much, maybe a 2-1 game, but I think they're going to get back on track this weekend.
Oliver Platt's Forge's Theater of Nightmares, Princess Auto Stadium, plus 112, Valor plus 204 at home.
Give me Halifax. This one's tough to call. I honestly don't have a pick in this game. I think Cavalry at plus 340 I've got on my sheet here is a crazy number. You got to get on that. And I like Halifax plus 150 against Vancouver. Those are my two that stand out this weekend.
Valor at home, plus 204.
Refusing to answer the
who
question.
have been excellent away from home. Excellent.
Plus 112 on Forge.
Plus one. They're plus money on Forge. You really want to slip into that top.
1 win in 7 away for Forge.
That's why they'll win this one. They're due.
It's time. It's time. And the excellent away form, I mean, in big matches for them where we've seen them go to places like Stade Saputo and come up with a result. They want to translate that back into the CPL with CanChamp just 3 weeks away for them. It's going to be an excellent match week 17. Hope you will join us for all of it, but for the entire crew. I've been Adam Jenkins. This has been One Soccer Today. We'll see you this week.